2030.
Saudi Arabia, the Public Investment Fund,
It's a
there's
big
a lot of
vision.
excitement
It's
around
transformational
specifically.
change. Every aspect of the kingdom, economic, social, cultural, religious.
The 2030.
This is the 2030.
Yalla.
This is the 2030 episode 24. Dr. Hanaa, how are you? How are things?
I'm good. Thank you. How are you?
I'm doing well. Yeah, a long week here. We've had a really good run of episodes here this week. We have a really good, not just really good, a terrific conversation in just a few moments with Dr. Ibrahim Almojel. He is founding partner of Readiness Khwarizmi Holding, which owns investment entities in venture capital, PE, and real estate. He is also former CEO of the powerful Saudi Industrial Development Fund, SIDF, where he served between 2018 and 2022. He was sort of at the helm for the NIDLP when they rolled that out for Vision 2030, so it's a great conversation.
Really looking forward to that. I think that he has some great insights. And before joining SIDF, he was at Aramco for several years. And I think that his experience there is also very insightful. And, you know, Ibrahim has been a mentor to so many young people within Saudi Arabia over the years that he's definitely well loved and well regarded by a lot of people who owe a lot of their career kind of trajectories to getting really great advice from him. So I think that that's something that people don't really necessarily know about him.
Yeah, Stanford guy too, and a friend of yours, of course, which was really cool that he would come on to the program. He says he doesn't do a lot of podcasts either, so that was really exciting that he would come on our show. So that's coming up in just a few moments, and then we'll talk a little bit about news. So if you haven't done so yet, please subscribe to this podcast. If you're a first timer, we see first timers every week. It's cool that you're here. So please subscribe just so you get our content delivered to you. Let's get to it. Let's get to our conversation with Dr. Ibrahim Almojel.
The 2030.
We're super excited to welcome onto the 2030 main stage Dr. Ibrahim Almojel. Dr. Ibrahim is the founding partner of Khwarizmi Holding, which owns investment entities in VC, PE, real estate, and he holds multiple board positions in the banking and investment sectors, including the Saudi National Bank and the Awqaf Investment Company. He was previously CEO of SIDF, and before that he held various roles at Saudi Aramco, including CEO of its investment arm, Wisaya, and a very active proponent of developing and mentoring young talents. Welcome, Dr. Ibrahim.
Thank you, Dr. Hanaa. It's a privilege to be with you here today.
Ibrahim, could we begin by just talking about Khwarizmi Holding, how it's structured, what you're investing in?
Khwarizmi Holding, we are creating an asset management company focusing on private markets. And the idea is to have a specialized entities in different sectors. So the first is Khwarizmi Ventures, and we do seed to Series A in MENA. We have a $70 million fund. We have a team in Riyadh with members in Cairo and Dubai. And we've invested anywhere from Morocco to Pakistan, with the majority being in Saudi, UAE, and Egypt. And then we have Khwarizmi Real Estate, where the first entity is in the UK here. It's called Orbium Capital Partners. And we have a couple of deals, $200 million of assets. We launched our first fund focusing on specialty living, student housing, and senior living around the UK. And then we launched Khwarizmi Partners, private equity, focusing on Saudi, specifically on SME growth in traditional sectors, as we believe the landscape is changing and there are opportunities for new players to enter, and we want to fund their growth. And we launched a $125 million fund. We should have the first close post-summer, mostly backed by the PIF and NDF entities, Jeddah and SGC. And finally, this year, we set up, but we didn't launch it yet, Khwarizmi Industrial, focusing on manufacturing and infrastructure. And the premise here is that we want to own private markets, and the majority of our investments are betting on the changing landscape in Saudi Arabia.
So how, in your view, and we'll focus a little bit more on the Saudi Arabia investments, how can Saudi Arabia, it's got a ton of traction now in developing the kind of key ingredients for a thriving VC ecosystem and PE ecosystem as well. How can Saudi Arabia sort of take those elements of early success and build on them from there and create sort of a more vibrant ecosystem?
So I think the story in the VC is a great example. After I came from my studies, I was part of an angel network in Saudi, and we started the Eastern Province. And I remember at the time, this is 2011, 2012. It was very difficult to find founders. We do an event every 2-3 months, and we spend months trying to make sure we have 2 or 3 founders who are somewhat ready to present. This is only a decade ago, and you see a boom. Now we are leading. We crossed $1 billion a year of VC investment. We're leading in the region. And the way it was done was by allowing the private sector to lead, by also creating some government initiatives to help jumpstart this. And the main success here is Saudi Venture Capital, which is an entity led by His Excellency Dr. Nabil Koshak, and it's part of the National Development Fund ecosystem. And they go and say, I'll anchor new VC. We didn't take their money in our VC. We closed before they, by the time they approved this, we already closed. So we are the only ones who actually said no to them. So they keep reminding us of that, or we keep apologizing. But that what they did to the ecosystem was impressive. Within 5 years, they really helped create a lot of that. And then you saw the power of successes. So the Kareem story really changed the mindset about VC. And then you have other stories like Jahez, now Ta'mini, and when do you know things are changing? When you see that the best and brightest of the new college grads want to go to this sector. 20 years ago, they wanted to go to Aramco. 15 years ago, they wanted to go to banking. 10 years ago, consulting. Maybe 5 years ago, government. And now we see many of them wanting to go to VC and startups. It's impressive. At Khwarizmi, in the 2.5 years for the fund, we looked at around 3,000 companies and we invested in 30. Long way from the 3 companies a quarter.
That's fantastic. And actually, I want to build on that. I think that it's exciting to see that more people are coming into the sector. But I wonder, I mean, you've lived in Silicon Valley, you've studied at Stanford, you've seen some incredible companies kind of grow. And I wonder what you think that Saudi needs to do to really become not just an adopter of technologies, but an exporter and a global leader.
These things take time. So we have a big opportunity right now to transform the economy. They might be examples of something else that works somewhere else, but the fact still is that you're developing that technology here. And what would happen when you have those companies grow and become engines of themselves, the graduates of those companies can go, and then those companies themselves will be the buyers and investors of other companies. This is how you go into more deep tech investments. The government role has been creating with SVC and investing in education. So the scholarship program that we had 15 years ago, the new version today, they're really helping fuel that in the long term. They announced a new strategy for innovation and technology. The strategy was announced by His Royal Highness, the Crown Prince. That push and saying this area, this research and development and innovation, is something that is with importance at the highest level of the government, is something we are not used to. And seeing that interest and that push, for me, the main change, not only it will bring in more sources of capital, more government incentives, but it will excite the young people to get into those areas. So once we have young people wanting to do more science, more technology, you'll see an immediate change in the ecosystem. So I'm very, very optimistic and very hopeful.
I think we should pivot just a little bit to talking about actually a sector that's very closely tied to a lot of the investments happening both in VC and PE, but it's the sort of development of industry in Saudi Arabia. And you mentioned deep tech just a few minutes ago. I guess I'm curious, you were CEO of SIDF sort of during the launch and the implementation of the NIDLP. Are there some major accomplishments you achieved as head of SIDF that make you proud to have contributed to the vision? And from here, we kind of want to talk about industry as a broader swath, but you were such an integral part of that for 5 years. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
So the reason I never thought I'll ever work in government. So I always thought of myself as a private sector, maybe go to Aramco, learn, and then go do your own business. But seeing the change that's happening in Saudi, I just really reflected that long from now, I'm talking to my grandchildren in the future, and I just had to have been part of this. You can't see the transformation that's happening and not being engaged in. And you don't need to be in government to be engaged in it, but I really wanted to be part of that. So when the opportunity presented itself to lead such a respected, well-designed institution like SIDF, it's a 50-year-old institution. I put my plans aside and I said, you know what, just be part of that vision. We hear about great transformations in companies, and it's mostly, some succeed, some don't, but seeing a transformation at a country level, and it's not only, it's cultural, it's governance, it's economical, it's the whole thing is being rewritten. It's really, really exciting. And we'll get examples. I'm very proud of everything I did with SIDF. I'm very proud of my colleagues who are leading it right now and the path they took it forward with. In the 5 years, I would say that two most important changes and the most closest to my heart. The two most important changes were changing the bylaws to change the organization from focusing only on manufacturing with a single product to focus on manufacturing, mining, renewables, and logistics with a slew of projects, and increasing the capital during the vision from 40 to 65, then to 105 billion riyals to really help with that. The change that I'm closest to my heart is the redesign of the SIDF Academy in Nukhab and creating these training programs and scholarship programs for the young people at the SIDF, where we have paths in finance, in engineering, and in market analysis with the top schools. So we have a program with LBS, with Stanford, with Berkeley. We have just different programs that really invest in young people, and that's really close to my heart. If you think of NIDLIP, the achievements that happened during that 5 years, the transformation of let's think infrastructure, funding, and regulation. If you think, and this is the whole industrial ecosystem, funding is SIDF more than almost tripling its capital. So from 1974 till Vision 2016, the capital grew from nothing to 40 billion riyal. Then from 2016 till 21, or actually 2016 to 2019, grew to 65, then 105. What the fund have been doing over the last 10 years, I think is more than what's did in the entirety of its life. In terms of number of clients, in terms of amount and product and amount approved and amount spent. But also the creation of the Exim Bank. I still sit on their board. Created a bank. The initiative was approved in 2019. The bank was set up in 2020. Now they already deployed around 20 or 30 billion between insurance and direct loans. And that is I like to share the example of the Exim Bank to show you how the vision changed things. When it was started, it was approved as an initiative to create a bank. Then the chairman told us, you need to spend the first 5 billion riyal this year. And my answer is we don't have a bank. We have an approval to create a bank. Figure it out. I remember we huddled, then we came up with an idea that we need, why don't we do an outsourced CIO model where SIDF does it, but we need a cabinet approval. Within weeks, we got the cabinet approval. Less than the first year, we approved 6.1 or 6.2 billion riyals of loans and spent 5.1. This is before the bank was set up. This is 2019. The bank was set up in 2020. It tells you the willingness of the government to take tough decisions, to take risks, and they know we'll make mistakes. Things will not be ideal, but really you need to create an impact today. And that's the funding, the infrastructure, the creation of the special economic zone areas. I chair the one in the logistics zone in the airport, but there is a system now for special economic zones. The industrial zones, like the Royal Commission of Jebel Yanbu, is expanded to be 4 areas, not only 2, so almost doubled in size. Mudun, for SMEs, grew completely and diversified its offering. And for the regulation, they really went law by law. But the most important one is the creation of the government purchasing law, which required to create an allocation for local content and an allocation for SMEs. So this really helped ensure that the dollar spent by the government just goes around within the economy before it goes out. And that had a massive impact on the industrial sector.
a little bit more tied to SIDF and your time there, the mining sector. I mean, recently you had the Hanaa mine at an auction. They're bringing in international mining interests to start investing and developing this sort of nascent sector that's been there forever, obviously. I'm curious because, I mean, that only happens after years of work, and SIDF was, along with the ministry, worked on developing the mining sector. Can you give us sort of a state of the union on where the mining sector is now and opportunities and where it's going?
So SIDF only helps in the financing aspect. The ministry did a great job. It used to be under the Ministry of Petroleum and Mining. And there was a lot of work done, but the transformation that happened with NIDLIP, beginning with the Ministry of Energy and Mining, the Ministry of Industry and Mining, has been amazing. Actually, timely yesterday in the Council of Ministers, in the cabinet, they approved the new mining program to support all this mining investments. They announced the mining strategy a couple of years before, and they transformed the way it's done. Now the bidding is transparent. You can see it online. You see live bidding, who's bidding against you, maybe not their name, but you see the price is done in a way that is very transparent, one award for its transparency and efficiency and effectiveness. Because mining usually globally is a very tough sector and usually has a lot of other challenges, to put it mildly. But the way it's been transformed in Saudi really is very, very different. And this helped attract a lot of investors. When I was in the mining forum in Cape Town, the keynote speaker, who wasn't from Saudi, wasn't from the region, this is keynote speaker, international mining company, has no presence in Saudi, speaking in Cape Town in South Africa. The main topic of his keynote, go to Saudi. It was impressive. This is a multi-billionaire guy. So it's not someone you can, is looking for a deal or looking for something. He's just, the change is impressive and the opportunity is massive. So even the CEO of Ma'adin, I remember reading a tweet for him last couple of days that the assessment now is there are $2 trillion of minerals worth in Saudi. The last assessment I remember was 1.4. I think now they updated it to 2 trillion. It's a massive sector, underinvested, underutilized. The government is investing. His Royal Highness, the Minister of Energy with the Minister of Industry, I think they announced a program for the geo-assessment of Saudi. So the government is investing in the high-level assessment to create that data to make it easier for the explorers to come and invest. It's a long-term play, but it's a massive sector. We are not at Khwarizmi. We are interested. We are not there yet. We need to grow up a bit more because it's larger capital, longer time. But we will be there when we will invest.
And that's fascinating. And I think, what's really interesting actually is the idea that, all of these changes are happening really quickly, but there still is an appetite to make sure that we are supporting the change as much as possible and supporting those who are entering, right? So I'd like to think a little bit wider than SIDF, right? And given your background as the CEO there, can you tell us more about kind of what are the key industries that are taking off? And is there effective support beyond kind of what you just mentioned for SMEs in the industrial sector specifically?
So let me widen the answer to be different sectors as an investor today. So why did we go to investment? Why do we have a PE for SMEs? Why do we have a VC? Why do we have one for industrial infrastructure? Because we believe there are opportunities in each. So if we are presenting this to potential investors, let me tell you what are the opportunities in each and why. Because I'm not now a government official trying to sell you. I'm actually voting with my time and money. So I left a good job to do this full time because I'm a big believer in it. So we jumped in it. And at the end of every month when the salary was supposed to come and no salary, it's a reminder of that commitment and that belief in the investment landscape. So for the VC, I had a discussion with a global advisor for funds. He told me we were not sure what will happen, after the challenges, global VC. He said the region will not be impacted. You are at $3 billion today. When we did an assessment relative to South America or LATAM, to Southeast Asia or South Asia, different areas of developing economies, and adjust it for GDP per capita, for population, blah, 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 you should be at $15 to $20 billion a year. We are at 3. So it's such a nascent area, and it's a tech savvy area. There is a lot of liquidity. There are challenges with fragmented markets, but that exists everywhere except in the US and China. But Latin has the same issue. South Asia has the same issue. And yet there's only 3 billion out of the $15 billion a year in VC. So it tells you the potential for transforming and disrupting a lot of those businesses and a lot of those sectors in Saudi. So we see a lot of opportunities. We see a gap in growth, not many people in growth or credit, a lot more in early stage. But as the ecosystem develops and more of the early stage companies grow, there'll be more capital to come. In SMEs, we believe, general SMEs, we believe in that the way the Saudi economy is being run now is very different. And that change happened really only in the 70s before. So we had Saudi Arabia initially from the 30s till the 70s, some of the oil money, but things changed slowly. In the 70s, you had a new group during King Khalid time, with King Fahd being the conference. And there's all these educated Saudis who became ministers and government entities and really transformed the way the government works, which created opportunities for many new players. We think the same thing is happening today. So some businesses are adapting, some are not, but there is a lot of opportunities for new players to come in traditional sectors that's either being created because we didn't have the sector before, like tourism or hospitality, or because there is a big drive, like women employment created a bigger consumer push that didn't exist before, or sector that where the business model changed with the reform on labor and reform on tax. The business model changed to be focusing and favoring more value add entities than low cost entities. With that, you see a lot of players coming in, and that's why we created the PE. We want to fund their growth. So we're not like a turnaround PE or like just cut it and sell it kind of PE. But we believe all these traditional sectors, a lot of players are coming in. You will not have a G20 economy with such developed and deep stock market, but yet a lot of blue ocean. These blue oceans came because of regulatory change. Tourism is the best example. We did a small FOMO investment in a small operator, a micro operator, a couple of years ago. And even though we are a minority, even though the investors, the owners are not they're very good people, but not sophisticated investors, just by shifting the strategy and we seconded someone there, we grew net income 10x in 3 years. And the only reason it's not much larger now, because the majority of the investors never expected this and focus on distributing dividends. So we are making our money all back within 4 years without selling anything, but it could have been much larger. Why? Because this is such a blue ocean in a rich economy that doesn't happen. I mean, now for manufacturing, there is a huge opportunity for people with any long-term view, because the structure is changing and government is favoring higher local content. But also, if you think of global trends, I'll highlight 3. Scale is losing to customization. Cheap labor is losing to automation. And efficiency is losing to resilience. If you think of those 3 together, it means that the global supply chain is changing to be more localized, and it's favoring capital over labor and favoring local market versus global market. So if you think of that, you think if you want to serve this region, which is traditionally underserved, whether it's Africa, MENA, or Central Asia, you have a great hub in Saudi because you have accessibility to them, you have great logistical structures and channels, but also you can be competitive with automation because capital is cheaper, whether it's infrastructure or actual capital injected through SIDF and other means. This allows people to be competitive, and as they are redesigning the global supply chain to avoid dependency in one area, many can think of Saudi as a way. And I think the best example is the air product investment in green hydrogen in NEOM. It's the largest green hydrogen globally, was then third air product, third aqua power, and third NEOM. This is public information. funded by International Bank, but also by SIDF and the Infrastructure Fund, which I used to sit on their board, and will be all for exports. These changes allow for opportunities to come in. If you just come to the government and say, I can create exports and I can create high value jobs, you can negotiate a better deal and you can benefit from the global trends that are changing. So it's a long answer, but as you can see, I'm very excited about it.
It's a great answer, and it kind of ties everything perfectly together. On the VC thing, it's a space I work in as well. You have another sort of enormously positive things that, you know, are part of your answer, but youth, you have connectivity, you have really, I mean, the vision is the coherent plan that everybody believes in, everybody's bought into it. And what's part of that is positioning between East and West, global supply chain positioning. And then you have, as a result of that, new sectors that are emerging, right? I mean, space, defense, all things that would seem kind of ridiculous to be made in Saudi, local content. And you talked a little bit about that, but can you expand, like, where is Saudi Arabia going with its efforts to really double down on local content and to hit some of the goals that are in the vision and some of these other related plans to start really making things locally?
So for local content, the authority did a great job to say, and they now package it in whether it's government purchasing or the government companies, that a percentage has to be Saudi value add. And they benefited from the example that Aramco had in E.24, their program. And it's not simple, just made in Saudi or simply just do this. They actually looked into what's the actual value add. So if you have R&D, you have for that. If you have higher value add employment where engineering or design or some of that, you get points for that. And they look at that value add that's created and they support that. So you can be a very large manufacturer, but you only do simple assembly, and an SME who has higher value add will get preferential treatment over you because of that. Of course, it takes time because you have trade-offs between building that capacity and projects that need to be built right now. And like anything, there are teething problems and challenges, but you see the impact already. And for example, in the housing boom that happened in Saudi, one of the main successes and really discussed in the Vision 2030 is the increase of ownership among Saudi of their homes. We used to be majority renters and now majority owners because of the introduction to the mortgages, and they structured in a way that enables Saudis to grow with it and to develop that skill. So majority now are owning their own homes. That, alongside with the local content, really helped the manufacturing and building material sector grow. It was challenged because it was only dependent on government contracting, and now it had another life because of this housing boom. And now when it comes to military, it's a longer play. There is a direction to be 50% of the spend in Saudi. I think they grew it. I'm not aware of the latest numbers, but I know they grew it tremendously, but I don't know if they are on path to that or not. And they created the authority to govern, and then the company that will partner and build. When it comes to renewables, we can see that impact. And so you see more like the green hydrogen, you see solar panels, you see a lot of that being done. And Aqua has a great success story where they went and looked into their value chain step by step and say, okay, this transformer can be done here. This can be done in Saudi. And they talk to companies and say, okay, I will build this. You need to build that capacity. And now those guys some of them are exporting to the US.
I'd like to pivot a little bit and ask about something that I care a lot about. You have such deep experience. You've played a really, really big role in developing young talent, first in Aramco, then at SIDF. SIDF, I believe, was continuously voted as one of the best places to work. I'm sure Khwarizmi is as well. But how do you feel about youth readiness? And what do you think we can do to really kind of develop the talent that we need for our economic plans of the future?
Yeah, I'm a big fan, and I've seen it throughout my career. And I think and I notice even a shift. People who are 10 years younger than me and born in 1990s and younger are different than people who were born before, because of the internet or whatever, there are changes that happened. And you see this, and they benefit from the scholarship program we've had for the last 20 years. That program really, it was introduced in 2005. So many were born in the late 80s, 90s, went to college through that program. So majority, more of that generation benefited from the scholarship program than the previous, or 10 years before or 20 years before. So we see the dividend of that program. We had hundreds of thousands of Saudis being educated from China to the US. And it's not about the education. We have great universities in Saudi, but having those different experiences and being able to understand different ecosystems and economic models. So you have a discussion with someone who studied in the UK, someone who studied in China, someone who studied in the US. So everyone brings a different perspective to where they go. We have a lot of great talent in Saudi. The way to leverage is to really give them a chance and bet on them. At Khwarizmi, we take that, and the founders, every one of those entities is partner-led and owned. And for the majority, actually for all of them, this is the first one they lead. So we not come and be an employee or part of an organization, then you can have some experience and be a partner. We are making bets on people, like they're making bets on us to set this up. They're making bets on us, and we're making bets on them. I see a lot of amazing talent, self-educated, very sophisticated, tech savvy, world global view. Of course, this is something that you can't get enough of. So the more we invest in allowing opportunities for our younger talent to invest in themselves and help them challenge themselves and build their network, build their expertise and skill set, the better it is. At SIDF at the time, we didn't only limit it to education internationally or in SIDF, but we also created secondment programs with Crédit Agricole and HSBC and Ronald Berger and IKEA and others, depending on the area of expertise, so that people can, and it's not about that it's much better there than here, but having different cultures and different perspectives really changes the mindset. We have an amazing set of talent. It gives me a lot of energy to be part of their stories, and the whole Khwarizmi is built on that. When we talked about young talent, I think the real change and the big energy provider was the incorporation of women into the workforce. They've been always somewhat in the workforce, but opening all these opportunities for them, it just created a huge dividend. And Dr. Hanaa, you're an example of that. Is we have the best educated. We've always had more women than men in post-secondary education, but that talent was not tapped to its maximum potential. There's ways to go more, but now that energy that's created and that creativity and productivity really is yielding a great dividend. You are an example of what's making Saudi great.
I really appreciate that. Thank you very much. Dr. Ibrahim Almojel, it is such an honor to have you on the show. Thank you so much for finding time in your busy schedule to come on the 2030 and talk to us a little bit about your background and what you're currently working on. So thank you again.
No, my pleasure. It's a pleasure to be with you. Thank you for doing this.
Let's get to the news.
Saudi Arabia welcomes the birth of 4 cheetah cubs after 40 years of extinction in the Arabian Peninsula. 4 cheetah cubs were born in Saudi after the 40 years of extinction in the peninsula. The National Cheetah Conservation Strategy, recently launched by the National Center for Wildlife, is responsible for this, and it coincides with the launch of this strategy, which marks a significant milestone for the initiative spearheaded by the Minister of Environment, Water and Agriculture and the NCW Board Chairman, Engineer Abdurrahman Al-Fadli, last year. Given the global challenge of cheetah conservation, with only 15% of wild-born cheetahs successfully breeding in captivity, and just 20% of those continuing to produce offspring, this achievement by Saudi Arabia in having 4 cubs born and launching the NCCS underscores the kingdom's commitment to biodiversity preservation, including the protection of endangered species and the ambitious goal of reintroducing previously extinct ones.
I love this story. You've seen a fairly consistent interest in Saudi Arabia for protecting wildlife, especially in the last kind of 7 to 10 years. You've had some efforts led by His Royal Highness Princess Rima bint Bandar Al Saud, who has championed the Arabian Leopard. So she does catmosphere and catwalk. I believe she also has a book with Aseline, is it that's all about the Saudi Arabian Leopard based in Saudi Arabia. So this is kind of part of several conservation efforts. You also had kind of the interest, I guess, and there's a famous photo of His Royal Highness the Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman releasing Arabian Leopard back to the wild. And that's been at the center of a campaign to protect wildlife in the kingdom. So you kind of have a bunch of different, conservation efforts kind of ongoing now in Saudi Arabia. It doesn't get a lot of press, at least outside of Saudi Arabia. So it's kind of good that we're drawing attention to this. The Royal Commission for Al-Ula has already committed $25 million to the Arabian Leopard Fund. That's a significant amount of money for a conservation fund. So, yeah, I love the stories. It's really cool.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, kind of, during COVID, wasn't there a lot of talk about big cats and exotic pets because of that show that was on Netflix? I can't remember what it's called right now, but the crazy lady and her cat.
Is it Joe the Tiger? No, what is it?
Tony the Tiger. It was
Tiger
something
King.
like that.
Yeah, Tiger King. Joe Exotic.
Was it Tiger King?
Yeah.
Joe Exotic. That's
and
exactly
Carol
what it
is the woman. Yeah, Carol's the woman that people were like, did she? Yeah. Anyway, sorry to
Right.
interrupt.
Well, no, you were helping. I couldn't remember the name of it, but it was really funny because it also was like everybody was at home and nobody had anything to watch. So the whole world kind of knows a little bit about Joe Exotic. The thing I wanted to say was I do know a few people that have had big cats at home in Saudi Arabia. And, honestly, growing up, going to zoos, sometimes zoos inside malls, zoos inside the middle of the city, you would see like very poor standards of taking care of these animals and a poor understanding. So this awareness is really, really important in order to make sure that people are aware of what animal well-being should look like and what the dangers are of keeping animals like this in captivity. There was this 10-year-old girl walking her cheetah a couple years ago, a video of her that was circulating on social media, and that caused kind of quite a bit of controversy and sparked this conversation about how people are still smuggling animals in and trying to keep them as pets. So the National Center for Wildlife in the kingdom really is working hard to raise awareness about how we should be treating animals better.
Yeah, and I'm sure you have some stories that you don't want to share from your upbringing and seeing things like that. And that used to be sort of a kind of famous, not like meme, but like meme style, like you would search for Saudi Arabia on Instagram, a long time ago, and it would kind of be some of the wealthy of Saudi Arabia, of the UAE and Qatar and Bahrain kind of showing off their animals or kind of prize at home, large, big cats and other cool animals like that. And they're cracking down on it, as they should. And, but it was sort of part of the whole aura of Arabian wealth, right? Was to have this kind of like private zoo in your house. And so you don't have to say any on air if you don't want. But yeah, I'm kind of glad that they've kind of dealt with that, because as you brought up Joe Exotic, Tiger King. What was so shocking about that was kind of like everybody thinks of the zoo. Like people, at least I think of the zoo as like the national zoo or like a very official thing. But there are throughout America these like quasi-official, privately run zoos. And that's kind of not cool. I mean, maybe it is cool, but then you think about what kind of oversight and regulation do they have on conservation and how seriously are they taking their jobs, and you are not bolstered by any confidence as you are introduced to the characters of that show, Joe Exotic, and all of the people that he has around him. Really one of the most unique characters ever on television, especially live TV. Sorry, this is a tie-in, but it's just really interesting.
So, no, I mean, exactly. I think that people can relate. I don't actually know people, that many people that had exotic pets at home. But there was during just the World Cup in Doha recently, some guys that went to somebody's house and there was a big cat there. I don't know if you remember that. It went viral as well. So it's not just like old videos. But I think the thing for me is just in general, animal welfare is something that's really important. And there are a lot of people that work very hard to spread awareness about that. I have a really good friend, actually, Dan Al-Qsaibi, who, rescues animals and works hard to spread awareness about it. But I think there's definitely an improvement. But one of the things that I experienced growing up was stray cats. And there still are so many stray cats in the kingdom. And I think that's an area we can move into after we take care of the big cats, right? But we used to adopt them. And so we used to have so many pet cats. They were outdoor cats mostly, but we'd feed them and take care of them.
Now, you don't have any pets at home, do you?
I have fish.
You have fish. That counts. Fish are animals, kind of.
I'm not a big fan. I just think that we should really focus on treating animals better domestically as well as the wildlife. And I think that there's definitely been an awareness, and there's actually a really big uptick in people having pets at home in Saudi, like dogs and cats in general. So I think there's a shift with the generation, probably.
Yeah, and you see that shift too in kind of the decline of the feral cat population in Saudi Arabia. It's still there. It's definitely still there, but I don't think it's as bad as it used to be. That's a challenge that you curb over a long period of time. So yeah, I mean, and you just use the word, but it is all awareness. It's all about getting people to understand conservation and how actions have consequences and all of that. But yeah, I mean, we're getting to deep dive territory with this.
Maybe
topic,
I
so
know. Maybe we should just do like a little Bob Barker reminder at the end of every episode.
Get your pets spayed and neutered, ladies and gentlemen.
There you go.
Yep. Okay, the IOC, we've got the Olympics ripping right now. The IOC confirms a 2025 next year debut for the Olympic Esports Games in Saudi Arabia. The creation of the Olympic Esports Games was confirmed during the ongoing 142nd session of the International Olympic Committee in Paris on Tuesday ahead of the Olympics. The IOC announced on July 12th that it has partnered with the National Olympic Committee of Saudi Arabia to host the inaugural Olympic Esports Games in the country in 2025, a move which has been unanimously endorsed by the IOC Executive Board. Quote, the esports community represented in our Esports Commission has enthusiastically engaged with this initiative. This is further proof of the attractivity of the Olympic brand and the values it stands for among young people.
Prince Abdulaziz bin Turki Al Faisal, the Minister of Sport and President of the Saudi Arabian Olympic and Paralympic Committee, emphasized the significance of the initiative. The Saudi Esports Federation was officially established in October 2017, on October 13th, 2017, under the name Saudi Arabian Federation for Electronic and Intellectual Sports, with Faisal bin Bender as the chairman. And then in May of 2021, the Esports Federation was separated from the Intellectual Sports Federation to be named the Saudi Esports Federation. And in October of 2023, Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman launched the Esports World Cup, which the inaugural competition is happening right now in Riyadh and is ongoing and very exciting. And we talked about it a few episodes ago.
Yeah. Esports is one of those things where it makes me feel old because gaming is not a sport. But I guess now I'm outmoded in that view because
by the Olympic Committee.
By the Olympic Committee, who's like, what are you doing over there sitting down talking into a microphone as if you're some athlete? No, I mean, what this does is like just further elevate Saudi Arabia's investments into esports over the last 7 years, right? I mean, like they've made a ton both directly into esports brands and other gaming brands, but then also into facilitating the gathering of e-athletes, I guess you might call them. I don't know what you call them, but I mean gamers, right? In Saudi Arabia, and those are not inexpensive events that they put on to bring the esporting community together. I believe I read somewhere that His Royal Highness the Crown Prince at least used to like some games or gaming when he grew up, which would ring true with his age. He is exactly my age, I think. So I definitely played a lot of video games growing up and even a little bit into adulthood, although not anymore. But this is congrats to Saudi Arabia. And it's going to be weird, right? I mean, it's going to be weird to see like, oh, I'm an Olympian from the UK, and my sport is FIFA 2025.
My sport
soccer.
is Fortnite. Right. Okay, the Saudi Central Bank, SAMA, explores potential of digital currencies to facilitate payments globally. This was a report from Sharq al-Awsat that I thought was interesting to bring to the fore. The Central Bank of Saudi Arabia joined as a full participant in a multi-country digital currency initiative known as the Bridge project, which was positioned as a potential alternative to the SWIFT payment system to enable faster and potentially cheaper international payments. And the head of development at Binance in Saudi Arabia, Bender Tunsi, told Sharq al-Awsat that the Bridge project was a cooperative initiative led by the BIS to explore the potential of digital currencies issued by central banks to facilitate trade and instant cross-border payments. The project includes central banks in China, Thailand, Hong Kong, the UAE, and Saudi Arabia.
This is an interesting development, one that could have very real world impact for anyone visiting or living in Saudi Arabia or any of these countries. This is how these things start. They sort of have an MOU together and they figure out like, hey, like this is generally what we want to do. It may not work for political reasons or for whatever trade reasons, but this is really cool. I also just note they are the central bank of Saudi Arabia. They used to be known as SAMA, but they still include SAMA in a lot of their communications because they're such an important entity that they have to make sure people understand this isn't some new thing that they've set up. Al-Tunsi believes that the success of this project will contribute to accelerating cross-border payments and reducing their costs, which is a huge upside of any digital currency. He noted that it will provide new settlement solutions for oil and gas exports, and he added that additional expertise in the field of blockchain and distributed ledger technologies, DLTs, provided by the Bridge project will give regulatory authorities in Saudi Arabia more comfort and ease in allowing border regulation and application of cryptocurrencies and other solutions based on blockchain technology. So really cool development here.
Yeah, but I think it's really important to note that this particular report is talking about digital currencies and not about cryptocurrencies, right? So digital currencies are centralized and usually aim to improve the efficiency of payment systems, and they're regulated by the central banks. And I think that that's probably, I don't think that in reporting on this we're encouraging crypto or talking about it specifically, but I think it's important to note that people do have issues with crypto because of how unregulated it is, and maybe this will open the door to some type of crypto, but potentially more regulated versions of digital currency.
Yep, this
to begin
is
with,
of
at
course
least.
Not investment advice. So I don't know how anyone could misconstrue that as investment advice, but it isn't. Saudi Arabia plants 13 million mangrove seedlings. That's a lot of seedlings. In the kingdom, is on track to reach its target of planting 100 million mangrove trees by 2030, in line with the SGI, the Saudi Green Initiative, and Vision 2030's goals. Some 13 million mangrove seedlings have been planted since the launch of the ambitious Coastal Forest Cover Program a year ago. The SPA said, quoting a progress report from the National Center for Vegetation Cover Development and Combating Desertification, most of the projects reported by the NCVC are currently being carried out along the kingdom's Red Sea coast, with Jazan province topping the list at 5.5 million seedlings. Mecca followed with 2.4 million, Medina with 2, Tabuk with 1.5, and Asir with 1. Good to get the breakdown there.
The breakdown's important, but I will chime in to say that also along the eastern province, they planted 500,000 seedlings, according to this report. And when I was working at Rawabi, we did a community service project where we went and replanted some mangroves as well. Aramco is very big on mangrove conservation, and I think it's rightly so, because it's very important when you think about how they really help the ecosystems of coastal areas. So this report also goes on to say that, scientists have found mangroves to be essential habitats for thousands of species. They stabilize shorelines, they prevent erosion, and they protect communities from waves and storms. But more so, they also protect kind of species of commercially caught fish. So again, this is another great conservation story that people don't always read about.
Yeah, we talk about the kind of top line, like Saudi Arabia is planting 10 billion trees or 100 billion trees, or, there's depending on kind of what we're talking about. But we talk about like that as like a kind of a big picture thing. They want to really mitigate the desertification, but it's a temperature thing. And for them, it's a business thing, right? I mean, like this will help fishing and farming and really a lot of things. And so the mangrove tree also is so amazingly cool, the erosion prevention. And they've been using it in Latin America for this purpose for a long time because the roots go down, they're big and wide. I just kind of think about like Bear Grylls, like trying to work his way through a mangrove forest with the swamp and the water. And it's just like, oh my gosh, it looks truly difficult, but really cool. Great effort from Saudi Arabia here. And this is the type of thing where it's like you plant a tree, best time to plant a tree is yesterday. And so that's what they're doing. They're just doing the work. So very cool.
And finally, last part of news today, Saudi Arabia has become a major global player in the mining sector, something we just talked about in the interview with Ibrahim as well. So Saudi Arabia's Minister of Industry and Mineral Resources, it's hard to say, Bender Al Khrayef, stressed on Tuesday that the kingdom has proven its strength in the field of mining, becoming a major global player in the field. It's forging ahead in developing its mining sector as part of the kingdom's efforts to diversify its economy. And he said this in his participation in a roundtable meeting organized by the Federation of Industries of the state of Sao Paulo during his official visit to Brazil.
Al Khrayef highlighted the 4th edition of the International Mining and Resources Conference set to take place in Riyadh in January, saying it has become the most important platform for discussing opportunities, issues, and solutions in the global mining sector. There has been so much going on in the mining sector in Saudi Arabia. And we actually just talked about it with Ibrahim Almojel about sort of, he kind of emphasized that mining was a little bit of a different sector, but it is part of the Ministry of Industry and Mineral Resources. So there's a lot of overlap with what the NIDLP was doing. The minister, Al Khrayef, said Saudi Arabia's national industrial strategy aims to diversify 12 main sectors and provide job opportunities at over 800 projects that are worth $1 trillion riyals, which is $266 billion with a B. Furthermore, the minister said Saudi Arabia was seeking to, quote, revolutionize the pharmaceutical sector with the target to localize 80 to 90% of insulin production and attract top-tier investments in healthcare. Yeah, very cool. This is a sector, again, that also doesn't get a ton of attention. I did last year and the year before when they were auctioning off rights to mines at Hanaa, my favorite word to say ever, and other places like that. And so kind of now you're seeing these international mining companies enter. It's really cool. Dr. Hanaa, I think that puts a bow on it. Great conversation with Ibrahim. We thank him for his time. I thank you for your time. Dr. Hanaa, thank you. Ciao.
Thanks. Take care. Bye.